Hey, what is up guys, this is Nishi from MST.TV here, and today I'm here with my ban list prediction for the April 2024 ban list. So Tom gave you guys his ban list prediction last Thursday. I wanted to share mine with you guys as well. I think some of our individual hits are probably going to be really similar, but we do have different thought processes and our approach might be a little bit different. So before we get into the prediction list itself, I do want to talk a little bit about the state of the game and the state of the market as well. Now obviously Konami is a company that has to make profit from the game, so there's going to be an inherent drive to not hit cards related to products that are coming out over the next few months. But Konami also wants players to be happy with the game, and if there's more people at big events as well as at locals and such, it's better for Konami, it's better for the stores, and it's better for the community overall. Now that said, I think that if it weren't for Snake Eye Fire King, the game is actually in a pretty good spot after Legacy of Destruction. We could have a really solid 3-deck format between Snake Eye, Voiceless Voice, and Yubel. Obviously we'd have some other rogue strategies or upcoming decks like the Tenpai Dragons coming out, but I feel like if Snake Eye were just dialed back a little bit and were a bit less dominant, the game would actually be really fun, and we'd even see a bit more diversity into things like Rescue Ace once again. Now those are a couple of things I want to keep in mind here as we go through the prediction. Okay, so for my first hit, I have Gimmick Puppet Nightmare banned. Now obviously the Gimmick Puppet lock is really annoying for players to have to deal with, and of course banning Expulsion before doesn't make the lock impossible since Albion the Sanctifier Dragon does exist. However, I do think that the lock shouldn't exist in the game itself. It's one of those things that makes it impossible to play the game, especially when the game is as fast-paced as it is today. So for me, I'm reluctant to hit any of the branded cards directly. I think that most of the branded deck is actually pretty fair, or at the very least not too broken, and Albion should get a reprint in the 2024 tins, so I don't think that Konami would want to hit it this early. And of course, yes, I do know we could simply use something like Jowgen the Spiritualist in place of Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, but there are ways to deal with Jowgen and get it off the field so that you can play the game again, whereas once Gimmick Puppet touches down, that effect is going to stay regardless of what you do. Finally, I do know that we have the Gimmick Puppet support that should be coming in the Infinite Forbidden a couple sets away, but from what I've seen, it's more of an FTK deck than something trying to set up a lock, and I haven't seen Nightmare being really used in any of those early lists that players are trying out. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking that Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is too degenerate of a card and should probably be banned. Next up, I also have Summon Limit banned, so maybe this is a bit of a weird opinion. We have something of a precedent set with Rivalry and Gozen and TC Boo all going to 1 on the previous ban list, so I think most players would expect that Summon Limit, also being a continuous trap floodgate, should go to 1 as well. However, I actually think that Summon Limit is something that should be banned, and I feel like it's more comparable to Vanity's Emptiness rather than those other floodgates. In fact, Vanity's Emptiness was a bit more fragile because it could be broken by itself, but Summon Limit can't do that, and given how fast today's game is, I feel like Summon Limit is essentially just shutting off special summoning altogether, since most of the time you can hardly do anything with just 2 special summons. Even though you do have extra deck options to deal with this card, like SP Little Knight or Nightmare Phoenix, they are both linked to monsters, so you'd have to have 2 monsters on the board, hope that they survive, and then make that link monster next turn, which is just way too slow. And if your opponent is in a good enough position to have flipped Summon Limit in the first place, they can probably finish the game off the next turn and get rid of those monsters before you can do anything with them. Now I know that Summon Limit was just reprinted in Rarity Collection 1, but I think that that actually makes it okay to ban, since Konami probably isn't going to be reprinting Rarity Collection 1 at all. They probably don't have an incentive to reprint Summon Limit, and they would have gotten all of their value out of the card as possible. So yeah, definitely an overly oppressive floodgate that restricts gameplay a little bit too much. I have Summon Limit as my second ban. The third ban I have here is Dimension Shifter. Honestly, I feel like this is something that players have wanted banned for the last couple of lists. I'm not too sure why it hasn't been hit yet. I feel like it's the equivalent of Mystic Mine, where players just hate seeing the card, they hate playing against it, but it's sort of something that can bring other decks back into the game and keep them alive out of nowhere, like it does with Fluwandereeze and Kashtira. It really does just feel like it's sort of a matter of time before Konami finally decides it's okay to hit Shifter. I'm just not sure if that's going to be this list or in a year from now. I do feel like now is a good time. I can sort of understand not hitting it back in tier format, since tier was so oppressive and your only really viable other option was something like Flu, which needed Shifter to keep up. But now Shifter does hit Snake Eye, Voiceless Voice, and I think it hurts Yubel too. So when that one card is hitting all of the other viable meta decks at once, I feel like it's no longer a necessary evil. Shifter was a cool gimmicky card when it first came out, but I feel like it just has become this extremely sacky, annoying card, and I really do think that if Konami were to ban Shifter, now would be the time, and it's a great time. Okay, my last ban here, it is Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. So to be honest, I originally didn't have this card banned, but I think that for the sake of consistency, this is something that should be hit on the ban list. If we're going to hit a card like Gimmick Puppet Nightmare because it stops you from playing the game completely, then it would also make sense to hit King Calamity. Now in both cases, neither deck that uses the card is the best deck, but if resolving a card like this or the Gimmick Puppet lock means that you can win the game 80% of the time, I feel like it's kind of a problem. I can't think of a single time where someone gets locked out by this card, can't do anything, and then gets OTK'd the next turn, and they're just like okay with it, that was fair. Looking forward a couple of months, Centur-ion does get some new support, but even then, it's not like the deck doesn't have good alternatives in the game now. They still have options like Cosmic Blazar Dragon in the game. King Calamity is just an old card that I think was designed under the assumption it would never realistically be brought out that often, but now that there's a way to cheat it out for free, I don't think anyone would be all that upset if King Calamity were banned. Alright, we're on to the limits, and the first one is of course none other than Snake Eye Ash. We've seen a lot of other one-card starters in the game's history. Cards like Armageddon Knight and Soul Eating Overraptor are things that can set off entire boards if left uninterrupted. I do think that Snake Eye Ash is actually one of the craziest one-card combos that we've ever seen, where the one card by itself lets you play around things like Nibiru by itself, and it's also a format where people are playing Crossout Designator in the main board just to ensure that Ash can resolve. Now, when we consider different ways to hit Snake Eye Fire King, I really do think that limiting Ash is the best way to go. Yes, you still have access to it through things like Bonfire, but it would be a pretty significant consistency hit at the very least. By hitting Ash, you're making stopping something like a Bonfire a lot more appealing or impactful, or your Veiler or Imperm on the Ash is going to be more impactful as well, but at the same time we do still have the original Sinful Spoils in the game, which can recycle Ash on top of that. We also have to remember that Snake Eye Ash is a super rare only. I do think that Konami tries to not hit cards that were printed in high rarities too soon because they don't want players to feel bad for having picked up those cards and finding themselves not able to use it so shortly anymore. But I think anything printed as a common or super rare is actually fair game to be hit. So yeah, maybe this is a bit repetitive from what you guys may have seen other Yu-Gi tubers predict and such, but definitely Snake Eye Ash 2-1 is something that everyone is expecting to see happen and is an extremely realistic possibility. I do have one other hit for the Snake Eye Fire King deck, and that is Kieran going to 1. Kieran is of course one of the most broken Fire King monsters. It can special summon itself out of your hand, and if it's destroyed, you send a fire monster from your deck to the graveyard. This card lets you send Barrier Statue of the... Wait, 1 second. There we go. Yeah, we definitely had some of you guys in the first half there. Anyways, yes, my other hit to the Snake Eye Fire King deck is going to be High Avatar Kieran to 1. So with the Snake Eye cards themselves, there's nothing else that I think Konami is going to hit. I do think Wanted will eventually get hit to 1. That card's crazy. It's like a quick play Chaos Space that doesn't require a discard to search, but it's also a secret rare from a relatively new set, and it will be needed to sell the 2024 tins, maybe even slotted early into Rarity Collection 2, so I don't think there's a chance that the card gets hit now. I feel like if we don't have some other sort of hit, then the deck is just going to load up on Fire King cards again, or pure Snake Eye is just going to go back to Snake Eye Fire King. And of course, when we look at Kieran, I think we naturally have to compare it to a card that does almost the same thing, and that is Unchanged Shervara, which was recently limited to 1. I think that Kieran is just objectively a better card for a stronger archetype, and it mixes well with the Snake Eyes, obviously. Kieran is kind of an annoying card for your opponent to have in their hand, since it can be used to help push through an Ash, an Oak, or a Poplar to dodge Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence, but it also doesn't target for that destruction. Also, for some reason, even when it is destroyed, right, it doesn't target the card that you're summoning back, or the card that you're popping. I feel like it's a pretty dangerous precedent in terms of card design. I guess my one concern would be that there is supposed to be that new Fire King card coming, and the new support is relatively new, but it is just from a structure deck, so I feel like it's still within the realm of what Konami could choose to hit. That said, I personally would have Kieran going to 1. Now, aside from those like 5 cards, I don't think I have too many other huge changes to make on this ban list. We just had a huge ban list last time where 25 different cards changed their positions on the list, so unless Konami is going to move like another 25 cards, I see this list probably being a pretty tame one, so a lot of the changes we'll have up ahead aren't really all that crazy. And like I said earlier on, I do think that with Snake Eye Fire King tuned down just a little bit, the game is actually going to be in a pretty healthy place. That said, I do have a few cards being unbanned here. Heavy Storm is, I guess, sort of a big one, but not really. Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm are still in the game, and they're not even necessarily played in every single deck, so I don't really see why Heavy Storm would be that problematic of a card in the game right now. I think you can actually argue that it should have come back before Feather Duster, but this card was also unbanned in the OCG recently, and I think it's a perfectly fine card over there. It's not too crazy, so I don't really see a reason for it not to go to 1 here in the TCG as well. The next unban I have here is Tidal the Water Dragon Ruler. Believe it or not, this is the last Dragon Ruler that needs to be unbanned. You can now play with all 4 rulers and their baby forms legal here in the TCG. Really, I don't think I've seen a single competitive deck use any of the Dragon Rulers, so I don't think it's going to be a thing now. I mean, I guess maybe people are afraid of Tidal being used in Mermails, but who really cares about that deck? Maybe if we get some new water support like some people are speculating on, but nothing is obviously confirmed yet. The Dragon Rulers are obviously just really power crept in the context of today's game, and Tidal being unbanned or even going to 3 doesn't really sound like it's going to do anything to the game. Alright, our final card in the limited section, it's Majespecter Unicorn Kieran. Honestly, I thought this would have happened on the last list because we knew that we had Majespecter support coming in Phantom Nightmare and the deck could really use its boss monster back. Kieran may have been an overly difficult card to deal with back a few years ago, but now I think that Kieran is perfectly fine, and it would actually be a really cool boost for a Pendulum deck, especially given how underrepresented Pendulums are in the current meta. Alright, so in pretty usual fashion, I do think that we're going to see several cards that are currently in the limited section move to 2 and then eventually be moved to 3. A lot of these cards I feel like could just be moved straight to 3, but Konami might have some sort of process for wanting to gradually remove cards off of the ban list just to make sure they don't take over the game. Dragonic Diagram, I think it's a fine card. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Obviously, you can pop cards in your hand, which is kind of crazy, but outside of that, I don't think it's really going to do all that much in the game, and your search targets aren't anything to write home about either. Ancient Fairy Dragon, obviously, it's a good card, but even right now with it in the game, it's not really being used by anything. I don't think putting it to 2 changes anything. Same thing with Dang Long, nothing's really going into that card. Monster Gate, I do think could be an interesting one, just because we should have the Infernoid support coming in Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge in just a couple of months here. I want to think that either Monster Gate or Reasoning are going to come to 2 or 3 on this ban list to sort of give Infernoid some help, just because over in the OCG they do still have that Grass Looks Greener, whereas we don't have grass here in the TCG, so either Monster Gate or Reasoning could help to push Infernoids just that little bit more. And then finally, Naturia Sacred Tree. I don't think it's really too crazy of a card. I think it can go to 2 just fine. I think it can go to 3. The Naturia engine is honestly pretty underwhelming the way it is right now. And then finally, we have the unlimited cards here as well. I don't think there's anything here that really needs to be explained. Pankratops was something that people were excited to see go from 1 to 2. No one's really used it at all. I think it's fine to go to 3. Terratops the same thing, unless you're really afraid of like Goblin Riders, I guess. Lightning Storm is something that was sort of weird to see semi-limited in the first place. It feels kind of out of place there. I think it's fine going back to 3. It's not really going to change too much. And then finally, Engage can go back to 3. I don't think the card is that crazily broken anymore. Obviously, still a really good card for Sky Strikers, and theoretically, it'll help the new Sky Striker cards that should be coming in Terminal Revenge as well, but I don't think it's going to bust the game wide open. Alright guys, so that is my prediction for this ban list. I don't know, I was looking at some other lists and a lot of them feel really excessive with the hits. I don't think we're going to see all of that crazy stuff. Like, we could see some of them. I think it's reasonable to see things like Skill Drain or Anti-Spell or Wanted or Harpy's Featherstorm being hit. I just don't think that this is the list where we're going to see all of those sorts of changes. I think that the hits I've highlighted here are exactly what the game needs to be brought back to being so much more fun, because I agree, seeing all of the Snake Eye Fire Kings and so many lists being exactly the same has gotten kind of stale. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you guys let me know your prediction list or what you guys think of my list as well down in the comment section. And if you guys haven't already, do make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest from Tombox and I. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.